So what would a Western be without a few dozen Indians chasing the lead actors across some of the more scenic countryside of the American Southwest? Well, what works here is not the word revisionism, but the expression tongue-in-cheek.
Now, it's no good pulling a gun on a man if you're looking at him like a scared rabbit.
This is location filming for the movie Lightning Jack, a comedy western starring Paul Hogan of Crocodile Dundee fame, co-starring Cuba Gooding Jr., who made such an impression as the lead in Boys in the Hood, and directed by Simon Wincer, who should know something about westerns, having directed, among other things, the epic television miniseries Lonesome Dove. Filmed in some of the classic western movie locations, like this one near Moab, Utah, Hogan plays a less than competent outlaw who teams up with a wise and perceptive mute, Gooding. According to Hogan, Lightning Jack is being filmed in a style that is a happy medium between the gritty realism of Wincer's Lonesome Dove and the more romantic and classical westerns like John Ford used to turn out on these same locations. In fact, they've been crossing this same piece of the Colorado River just east of Moab ever since director John Ford and John Wayne got here in the early 50s with movies like Rio Grande. Lightning Jack star Paul Hogan says any similarity is intentional.
The movie's like full of Western cliches, so it should be full of the areas we think of when you think of the West, the romantic West, the Hollywood West. So that's deliberate.
Yeah, you had a way with words. Do you want to do that as you're going off into the next shot, or are you happy to just do it?
Hogan is not only the star, but screenwriter and co-producer as well, and raised the nearly $25 million to shoot the film by selling shares to the public on the Australian Stock Exchange. Shares to both big investors and what Hogan calls the little punters.
And the idea appealed to me. I got 5,000 investors probably, little punters with $2,000 invested, and they maybe got 4,000 in the bank. And they it puts some pressure on me, but it makes me feel good that I'm like working for them and I'm not working for some giant foreign conglomerate of some sort.
And with Paul Hogan's multiple roles on this movie, Simon Wincer said he needs to know which hat Hogan has on when decisions are made.
It's an unusual situation for a director to be in, and although I'm co-producing with Paul, that sometimes I say to him, let's do another take, and he says to me, as the actor, do we need it? And I says, well, the writer won't be happy if you don't do another one because the line wasn't quite right. Or then I'll say, I don't think we should do that again because we need to move on to the next location, and he puts on his producer hat and says, yeah, okay.
And Cuba Gooding Jr. loved the idea that he was filming in a spot so steeped in movie history.
I was a big fan of all the John Ford westerns and, the spaghetti westerns of Clint Eastwood and everything. And, I've always loved horses. And this movie gave me the ability or the opportunity to show off my comedic ability and ride horses all day.
Oh, wow. Jim, this is a great view from here. You can see the Colorado River there and Castle Rock and the Priest and the Nuns and Adobe Mesa.
The man who owns this piece of property where movie companies love to film is John Hauer, a former college administrator from South Dakota who bought the 90 acres a few years ago, built this unique house with his wife Nancy with this 20-foot tall, 18-foot wide window set into the rock itself, and then discovered the incredible movie history of the land.
Yeah, I like the idea of the rock and had the idea to put the window in the rock. But at the time I did it, I didn't really know how much history there was here either.
Really? What, for example?
Well, the movies that were filmed here, like Rio Grande was filmed here, and John Wayne and Maureen O'Hara in that movie stood right outside the window, and John Wayne would gesture and point to those two trees over there that are kind of growing together, and they look, 40 years ago, they looked just like they do now. And there were a number of John Ford movies with John Wayne and a lot of very well-known movie stars that were made on this property.
For example, those spires that we see off in the distance, what are they?
That's called Fisher Towers, and that is probably one of the best-known landmarks in Utah because it's been in a lot of movies. It's in the background in a lot of really nice Western movies. I mean, you can see it time and time again in some of the movies where they're supposed to be going thousands of miles and yet it keeps showing up, And then in the foreground, it's called either Locomotive Rock or Snoopy Rock. If you look on the top, There's dog's ears and a dog's muzzle pointed in that direction.
This is the prime movie spot here then, isn't it?
Well, it's a popular one, and it's one of the few pieces of private property along the Colorado River with this kind of scenery, and probably the only one with this kind of terrain and rocks. Somebody asked John Wayne, why do you shoot all the movies here in Moab? And he said, it's because that's where God put the West. And John Ford's answer was, this is what Texas is supposed to look like, but doesn't.
Cut!
Paul Hogan, Cuba Gooding Jr., and a lot of Hollywood ghosts in Lightning Jack, due in theaters next month. For today, Jim Brown, NBC News, Moab, Utah.